Okay, good morning, everyone's ready to go? Okay, good morning, everyone. I want to acknowledge first that we are on Treaty 1 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Sergeant Paul Maneg, Media Relations Officer for the Manitoba RCMP. This morning, Superintendent Michael Kopang, officer in charge of the Manitoba Major Crime Services, will provide information on the arrest of Eric Wildman, which occurred earlier this morning in Belleville, Ontario. Following the statement from Superintendent Kopang, I will read the statement in French. There will then be a brief question and answer session. Bonjour, merci de votre présence aujourd'hui. Je tiens à souligner que nous nous trouvons actuellement sur le territoire du traité numéro 1 et sur la terre natale de la nation métisse. Je suis le sergent Paul Maneg, agent des relations avec les médias à la GRC du Manitoba. Ce matin, le surintendant Michael Kopang, officier responsable des services des crimes majeurs de la GRC du Manitoba, fourniront des renseignements sur l'arrestation d'Eric Wildman plus tôt ce matin à Belleville, Ontario. Après la déclaration du surintendant Kopang, je lirai la déclaration en français. L'événement se terminera par une brève période de questions. I'll now invite Superintendent Kopang to the podium.
Good morning, and thank you for being here today. This investigation truly began 11 days ago on Monday, June 7th, when the Manitoba RCMP received a report that 40-year-old Clifford Joseph was missing. A few days after that initial call, it became clear to us that the disappearance was suspicious in nature. We engaged the public and asked for help right from the start of this investigation. Further investigation led our officers to determine that Eric Paul Wildman, 34, from the RM of St. Clements, was a person of interest in this disappearance. On June 11th, we located Mr. Wildman's vehicle. A search warrant was obtained, and the vehicle was searched on June 13th. It is during this search that officers found firearms, police-style tactical equipment, police patches, and other items resembling police clothing, as well as red and blue lights that could be affixed to the interior of a vehicle. As the investigation progressed and further evidence was gathered, the increased risk to public safety became apparent. As the risk assessment increased, so too did the public alerts as this manhunt began. The Manitoba RCMP utilized significant human and technical resources in attempts to locate Mr. Wildman. Mr. Wildman was formally charged with unsafe transportation of a firearm and possession of a prohibited device without a license. More charges are expected. Even with our best efforts and the direct assistance of the Winnipeg Police Service and the Ontario Provincial Police, police simply do not have the numbers to surveil all of Manitoba's vast areas. In these situations, the public's help is essential. The search took our officers to locations across southeastern Manitoba, and specialized units were brought in to assist. These specialized units included our emergency response team, air services, police dog services, forensic identification, intelligence analyst, and major crime services. All of this in addition to our general duty members. There were confirmed and credible sightings of Mr. Wildman and the vehicle on June 11th in Winnipeg and June 15th in Lockport, as well as a sighting of the vehicle in the early evening of June 16th in the Whitemouth area. During this week, we investigated numerous tips that led us to similar vehicles and other suspicious occurrences. Yesterday evening, the OPP received 3 reports of a vehicle with a matching license plate at a residence just outside of Belleville, Ontario. Well informed of the risk, the OPP deployed tactical resources to secure the residence. Throughout last night, RCMP major crime investigators worked with their OPP counterparts to assist in preparing a warrant. During the execution of that warrant, in the early hours of this morning, shots were fired at the OPP officers. After a protracted negotiation, the OPP safely ended the situation through negotiations, resulting in the arrest of Mr. Wildman and another male occupant of the residence. No one was hurt during this operation. I understand that the other occupant was an associate of Mr. Wildman's. RCMP officers from our major crime services are in Ontario now with the OPP to determine next steps. Many questions were posed over the week about why the RCMP did not utilize our provincial Alert Ready capability. I want to take this opportunity to directly answer those questions. At no time during this investigation did we have the requisite knowledge of the specific risk that Mr. Wildman posed, a location where that risk might manifest itself, or a specific target of that risk. Without this, we would simply be raising fear without any possibility of mitigating that risk. I can say that there were at least 3 occasions this week where senior leaders were prepared to activate the Alert Ready system. But the tips associated to each of those situations turned out to be unrelated to our investigation. The most recent was yesterday morning in Haddishville. We are fully prepared to activate this system in appropriate situations, but these situations simply did not present themselves during this investigation. I want to take the opportunity to thank the public and the media for your assistance. We released all relevant information at the earliest possible time to both inform the public and advance the ongoing investigation. I understand that it was through this national media coverage that the residents in Ontario identified the vehicle and promptly notified the police. On behalf of the investigative team, I want to thank all Manitobans who took the time to call in these tips. The investigation will continue in both Ontario and Manitoba. Significant work is yet to be done, and many officers will be working and very busy over this Father's Day weekend. I'd like to thank every RCMP employee who worked tirelessly on this search, as well as our brothers and sisters from the Winnipeg Police Service and the Ontario Provincial Police. They were always there when we needed them. Thank you.
Merci de votre présence aujourd'hui. Dans les faits, cette enquête a commencé il y a 11 jours, soit le lundi 7 juin, lorsque la GRC du Manitoba a reçu un signalement concernant la disparition de Clifford Joseph, 40 ans. Quelques jours après l'appel initial, nous avions toutes les raisons de croire que la disparition de Joseph était suspecte. Dans le début de l'enquête, nous avons demandé l'aide du public. L'enquête a mené des policiers à l'établir qu'Éric Paul Wildman, 34 ans, de la municipalité rurale de Saint-Clements, était une personne d'intérêt en lien à la disparition. Le 11 juin, nous avons trouvé le véhicule d'Éric Wildman. Un mandat de perquisition a été obtenu et le véhicule a été fouillé le 13 juin. C'est durant cette fouille que les policiers ont trouvé des armes à feu, de l'équipement tactique s'apparentant à celui de la police, des insignes de police et d'autres articles ressemblant à des vêtements de police, en plus de lumières rouges et bleues que l'on peut fixer à l'intérieur d'un véhicule. Au fur et à la mesure que l'enquête avançait et que les preuves s'amassaient, le danger envers la sécurité du public devenait de plus en plus évident. Notre évaluation des risques a pris du sérieux, tout comme nos alertes au public au début de la chasse à l'homme. La GRC du Manitoba a mobilisé un nombre important de ressources humaines et techniques dans le but de trouver M. Wildman. Il a été formellement accusé de transport non sécuritaire d'une arme à feu et de possession d'un dispositif prohibé sans permis. D'autres accusations seront portées prochainement. En dépit de tous nos efforts et de l'aide directe du service de police de Winnipeg et de la police provinciale de l'Ontario, nous avons tout simplement pas les ressources pour surveiller le Manitoba en entier. C'est pourquoi l'aide du public est essentielle dans ce genre de situation. Nos policiers ont fait des recherches dans plusieurs localités du sud-est du Manitoba et des unités spécialisées ont été appelées en renfort. Des unités comme le groupe tactique d'intervention, les services de l'air, les services cynophiles, la section de l'identité judiciaire, les analystes du renseignement et la section des crimes majeurs sont intervenus. Nous avons pu confirmer que Eric et son véhicule avaient été aperçus le 11 juin à Winnipeg et le 15 juin à Lockport, et que son véhicule avait été vu tôt le matin du 16 juin dans le secteur de Whitemouth. Durant la semaine, nous avons enquêté sur plusieurs renseignements du public qui nous ont mis sur la piste des véhicules semblables et d'activités suspectes. Hier soir, la police provinciale de l'Ontario a reçu 3 appels au sujet d'un véhicule dont la plaque d'immatriculation correspondait à celle du véhicule recherché situé dans une résidence à l'extérieur de Belleville, en Ontario. Bien au fait des risques, la police provinciale de l'Ontario a déployé ses ressources tactiques pour encercler la résidence. Durant la nuit, les enquêteurs du groupe des crimes majeurs de la GRC ont travaillé avec leurs collègues de la PPO à la préparation d'un mandat. Durant l'exécution du mandat tôt ce matin, des coups de feu ont été tirés en direction des policiers de la PPO. À la suite de longues négociations, la PPO est parvenue à mettre fin à la situation en toute sécurité, ce qui a mené à l'arrestation de M. Wildman et un autre homme dans la résidence. Personne n'a été blessé durant l'opération policière. Les polices des services des crimes majeurs de la GRC sont en Ontario pour travailler avec la PPO à établir les prochaines étapes. On nous a posé plusieurs questions cette semaine à savoir pourquoi la GRC n'avait pas eu recours au système en alert. Je vais vous prendre quelques minutes pour répondre directement à ces questions. Nous n'avons pas eu les renseignements nécessaires durant notre enquête sur le risque précis que présentait M. Wildman, le lieu où ce risque pouvait se manifester ou une cible précise. Sans ces renseignements, nous aurions semé la peur sans pour autant dissiper les risques. Je peux affirmer qu'à 3 occasions cette semaine, l'état-major de la GRC était prêt à activer le système en alerte, mais les renseignements reçus du public n'étaient pas en lien à notre enquête. Le renseignement le plus récent a été reçu hier matin à Harrisville. Nous sommes entièrement prêts à activer le système lorsque la situation l'impose, ce qui n'était pas le cas avec cette enquête. Je tiens à remercier le public et les médias pour votre aide. Nous avons diffusé tous les renseignements pertinents le plus rapidement possible, à la fois pour informer le public et protéger l'enquête en cours. Je peux vous confirmer que c'est la couverture médiatique nationale qui a permis aux résidents de l'Ontario d'identifier le véhicule suspect et d'avertir rapidement la police. Au nom de nos enquêteurs, je tiens à remercier tous les Manitobains qui ont pris le temps de nous appeler avec leurs renseignements. Je vous remercie chaque employé de la GRC qui a travaillé sans relâche sur cette recherche et nos consoeurs et confrères du service de police de Winnipeg et de la police provinciale de l'Ontario pour leur travail. Ils ont toujours été présents lorsqu'on avait besoin d'eux. Merci. Superintendent Kopang will now come to the podium to answer any questions you may have.
I don't have the specifics of that information. Well, I think the obvious conclusion that escalated the risk in this situation is that a cache of weapons and police equipment in the hands of a non-police person certainly can't be used for anything good or productive. So that escalated the risk. In terms of a specific threat or a specific target, if you would, we just simply don't have that information, and we didn't have it throughout this investigation. In Ontario, you mean? I don't have that information. We would have to discuss with the OPP. As you can appreciate, this is literally a few hours old in a different province. So we've got investigators on the ground, and in the coming days, we're most certainly going to be sorting through all of that information. We have mountains of information to sort out through, and that's, of course. You'll have to ask the OPP. That's not our investigation, and I'm certainly not in a position today to be able to comment on that.
Is there any indication about where he was heading to
Our
or why?
indication at this point, preliminarily, is that he was headed to that residence. We do not. So the last credible sighting was Thursday at around 7, 8 o'clock. That was a fairly reliable sighting. We believe that was the case. Obviously, it was headed in the general direction of the Ontario border. I can say that in a very timely way, we had extensive communications with the OPP. We activated, I think as everyone's aware, I think we released on that, a whole bunch of police resources. We set up roadblocks. We did everything that you would expect us to do. And we have no explanation at this point how he got through that, essentially.
In advance, did police have any indication that he was headed to this association?
None at all. So we had a full slate of investigative options at our disposal. At this point, I'm not at liberty to disclose exactly how we utilized. Some were successful and some were not successful. But we were certainly alive to all of them, and there was no stone or means left unturned. No information about that at all. So we're certainly aware of that capability. In this case, that was not helpful, and I'm not going to get into, if we had a GPS coordinate on him, we would have found him pretty quick, but we didn't. So. It was. I mean, at the end of the day, we're still, these are questions that we've got. It's an excellent point, one that we've certainly considered. It was a heck of a long drive in a fairly short period of time. But all I can say is the facts are that we saw him, at 7 o'clock the other night, And then this morning, or kind of about 24 hours later, he was in Belleville.
Is there any indication that other incidents took place along that extremely long journey? Is there other investigations ongoing?
Again, very fair question. We're unaware of any other related incidents during the weeks that we were investigating our matter or in Ontario. Now, in fairness, it's still early days. Up until really late last night, we didn't have a confirmed location for Mr. Wildman. So again, these are investigative steps that both the Ontario Provincial Police and the RCMP will be following up on. But at this point, I can confirm that we have no related incidents of any kind. I can tell you that we're still investigating it. We're investigating it like a homicide. I'm not going to be able to get into any of the specific information of either why, again, a fair question of either why we're naming Mr. Wildman as a suspect based on what evidence, nor specifically, any of the details around the homicide investigation, other than it will continue with great urgency over the next few days. We have not located any remains. I'll confirm that as well. And that search continues both at Mr. Wildman's property and in other areas. But again, with all of the developments in the last 24 hours, I'm sure you can imagine, we've got a lot of material to go through. And that investigation, as I said in my statement, there's going to be a lot of busy police officers over this Father's Day weekend. Fair question. We're currently not looking in Ontario for any kind of remains, but I'm gonna limit my comments to that. We still haven't found it. We're continuing to search, but that unfortunately would get into evidence that we've got that I'm not able to disclose at this point. But fair question. That is my understanding. Again, early hours, but yes, that's my understanding. Yes. It was a residence, I understand. Again, the early hours were a province away. I don't have all of those details. I'm sorry, I don't. We don't know. Sorry, are we talking about in Ontario? My understanding of the facts that have been relayed to us is that there were a couple of tips that seem to be essentially community tips based on, I think, the media coverage that they recognized that we were looking for them, obviously centered in Manitoba, and that they promptly called the police, and the OPP, being well aware, we've been sharing our officer safety bulletins with them for the entire week. We're well aware. They contacted us very quickly, and then we assisted them in gaining the warrant, and then they executed on that warrant. I'm sorry, I don't have that specific information. It wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't hundreds or thousands, but they were good tips for the most part. We had very legitimate tips. There was the car in Haddishville, almost an identical vehicle. Shortly after he was last seen that night. Very, very credible tips, but it wasn't the vehicle that we confirmed by VIN, for example. But lots of good tips that we followed out all over southeastern Manitoba.
You're obviously still identifying him as a suspect in a homicide. Are you expecting charges to that kind of degree be laid?
Too early to comment on that aspect at this point. We're expecting more charges. When and specifics of what, we've got a lot to unpack from what both happened in Ontario and as I think you mentioned earlier, what's transpired over the last few days. We expect in the next few days we're going to be getting a lot of more information. We got a lot of investigative avenues that we have to pursue, and we hope to fill in some of that, in the next week or so. Well, it's not certainly, yeah, it's not certainly unheard of. It's unusual, and those are obviously very significant factors in any homicide investigation, and we'll see how the next few days and weeks play out. As we have no information that file, I appreciate the coincidence involved. There's no information that's involved in any way with this. We're working on that. Don't know. Well, I can tell you when we heard that the OPP had this residence surrounded, our entire team was holding their breath. The last thing we want, particularly in the last few weeks, as everyone's aware, is any more people getting hurt. That's been our objective from the very start. We want to bring people in safely, allow the due process to play out. So we were holding our breaths, and it was a tremendous release for both myself and our team and the province, I think, as a whole, that this has brought to a safe conclusion. That's been our objective, and we're very grateful for the professionalism that the OPP showed in how they conduct themselves.
Is there any indication yet from OPP that the firearms, obviously there were firearms in this place, that any of those are linked to Manitoba?
Too early to tell. Okay. Thanks again. Thank you very much. Like you said, you played an incredible role, and we thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That'll conclude the press conference.